I actually just lost my grandmother recently in the last week or so. And my grandmother was one of the two women that raised me. I didn't have a father. I mentioned that to you the last time I was here. And it was a moment that struck me because mortality became very real. It makes everything clearer. It makes you realize what actually matters and what doesn't matter. It shows you that the days that we have aren't actually guaranteed to us, even though we take them for granted every day. I don't know if my flight home is going to actually happen. I don't know if I'm going to step out of the studio and get hit by a car. I don't know if my child isn't going to get hit by a car playing in the driveway tomorrow, because life is so fragile and we don't think about it until we watch its fragility dissolve in front of us. We hear about tragedy, but tragedy is always happening somewhere else. It's so real, and yet we don't realize it every day.
It's a good thing we don't.
That's the truth. That's how it feels right now for me as well. I kind of wish I could go back to being ignorant again. It's that Matrix red pill, blue pill moment where I kind of wish I could go back in and forget that reality and forget that mortality is reality.
And so does that change your priorities in life in any way?
It does. Like, the biggest way that it's affecting me right now is really with business, because, we had a conversation not too long ago where I was very focused on trying to triple the size of the business this year, because we had been tripling the year before and we had tripled the year before that. And it became this arbitrary number, this scorecard where I wanted to continue having this achievement. And then what I found is that scaling a business is no easy thing. And the struggles that come from scaling were consuming the majority of my focus all the time, until this moment happened with my grandmother. And then all of a sudden I realized I have a team of people who can scale the business. I don't have to scale it. I just have to empower the team to do what the team does. And my job is very different. My job is to enable, empower, encourage, direct, lead, manage their efforts. But it's their job to grow it. I can take some of that time and put it into the people that matter to me, the people that surround me, the people who have made me who I am, the people like the woman on the couch that I was visiting in her deathbed.
The business you're referring to is called Everyday Spy, right?
Yes, sir.
What is Everyday Spy? What is the mission of that business?
The mission of Everyday Spy is to use spy education to break barriers for everyone willing to learn.
And what is spy education?
Spy education is anything from specific spy skills, cognitive skills, physical skills. It can be breaking myths about what spies are and what spies are not, but bursting conspiracy theories, teaching spy processes and frameworks to everyone from entrepreneurs to business owners and CEOs, so that they can use those same frameworks to improve their leadership, to improve their sales, to improve their revenue or their organization.
Do you ever have a bit of a, you're a guy that thinks quite big picture about things, and sometimes thinks a level above everybody else. Do you think the people you teach these things to know what they're looking for in life? Do you think they actually know what they're aiming at?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't think that the majority of people who learn from Everyday Spy see the world in the way it really is. I think they're still seeing the world through a lens that was built for them. Have you ever looked through a window in an old cabin or in an old house? It's kind of hazy. It's maybe it's stained or it's dirty, or the dirt is so thick on it that it doesn't wash off. Have you ever seen a window like that?
Yeah. My old shed at home when I was a kid growing up.
So you're inside the shed and you're looking out onto a sunny day, and you know it's a sunny, beautiful forest on the other side of the window. You know it is, but that's not what you see through the window. I feel like that's how many of our high-achieving brothers and sisters feel. They know it's a sunny forest on the other side, but school and university and working for somebody else and growing their business has created this hazy glass. And you can't trust what you see through the glass. You know that what the glass is showing you isn't real, but you also can't prove it because you can't step outside of the glass. You're inside the shed. So a lot of what I try to do with Everyday Spy is just shatter the glass, because you don't need the glass to be between you and the real world. And that's what it felt like for me when CIA trained me how to be a field officer. I don't feel like they took me out of the shed. I don't feel like they cleaned the glass. I feel like what they did is they just shattered the glass. And there I was looking at the world for what it really was. And it all made sense until I started meeting other people who were still looking through the glass. And there's no way to teach them otherwise, or there's no way to convince them otherwise. The only thing you can do is teach them to break through the barrier themselves.
So that I can understand that, can you tell me what your perspective of the world was before and after the shattered glass?
When I was growing up, all through high school, I went to the Air Force Academy, which is a military school that you have to get accepted on scholarship to go to. Even getting accepted to CIA itself. Every step of the way, I believed that achievement came from doing what you were told better than anybody else so that you could be empirically better than the competition. Like, that's what I believed. But what I found along the way was oftentimes that was true, but oftentimes it wasn't. Sometimes people who had no business being next to me in a race at the Air Force Academy, on the college teams, at the CIA. Sometimes the people to my left and to my right had no business being there. They just were the son of somebody influential. They were the daughter of somebody important. They had money. They had opportunity. They were a foreigner. Who knows? But it wasn't always merit-based. But everything had always taught me that it was merit-based, that the best jobs go to the people with the best scores, who go to the best universities. Like, that's what I was taught. But that wasn't really the truth. The richest people weren't the smartest people. The most successful people weren't the hardest workers. And that was when, as a kid even, I started feeling like there's a forest on the other side, but all I see is this picture that doesn't seem to make sense. So then when I got to CIA, and CIA put me through their field tradecraft course, FTC, which is often referred to as the farm, what they did at the field tradecraft course is they said, society is conditioned to believe a certain way because society needs to be a giant economic machine. We all live inside of a giant machine. We are conditioned through the education process, through the industrial process, through the church process, to fall into a hierarchy that we believe is meritorious, that is a meritocracy, so that hard work and obedience and loyalty gets rewarded. Because the only way that the government stays in power of a large group of people is if there's a predictable system.
Is if they believe there's a system.
And since a system is really nothing more than a belief system, all you have to do to step outside of the system is stop believing or believe in a different system. So what CIA teaches us to do is find the people who question the system enough that they're open to being taught a different system. And then we teach them the system of espionage or treachery.
So they chose you because you were a bit of a defiant personality or thinker.
I would say...
Or on the cusp of, or potential of being.
I would say it differently only because defiance as a term by itself means that you just reject everything. Instead, it was more of like a curiosity. I was still very loyal to my country, very loyal to the idea of some sort of authority figure. I was still an individual that had a history of childhood trauma that turned me into a person that needed external validation, but I also chose where that external validation came from. So it was kind of the right amount of trauma to be able to make me loyal to a specific organization. Whereas some people who are truly defiant aren't loyal to anyone, right? They defy everyone.
So the CIA told you that the world is
predictable.
But also the way that you explained it made it seem like it was a bit of a conspiracy.
Not a conspiracy, but absolutely a system. A conspiracy means that there's some sort of, a conspiracy insinuates that there's some sort of negative intention. Mm-hmm. There is no negative intention. In order for there to be a society at all, in order for there to be structure and lawfulness, there needs to be a system. And in order to create the system, we have to intentionally, continually repeat and program the system. What is a business? A business is nothing more than a series of predictable, reinforced processes and systems that yield a predictable outcome. Why do we think a government is anything different? Why would we think that society is anything different? If you really look at what the church does, if you really look at what Harley Davidson does, it's essentially the same thing. Find people who believe in an ideology, bring them in, give them a framework to believe in that ideology. The church is good and evil, heaven and hell. Harley Davidson is freedom and individuality. And then you just give them a system to think about it. One wears crosses, one wears eagles. One meets on Sundays, one meets on Tuesdays at the local road bar. One goes on, civic duty to collect trash. The other goes on multi-hour road trips. But in all cases, they market to the young, they market to the middle-aged, they market to the very old. Their senior members bring in junior members. They have clubs, they have everything, right? They're two separate subsections of society, which is why we call them subcultures.
So now I understand that there's a system that I'm part of, and it's not malicious in terms of its intent. It just is what it is. It's how the world functions. It's how the country that I'm in operates, and it's required for there to be stability. Now, there's awareness, but is there any benefit in me doing anything about it? Is there anything I can do about it to make my life better?
There's absolutely things that you can do about it. You skipped over the awareness part as if it wasn't substantial. The first thing I would say is awareness of the system is quite a substantial step, because most of us are not aware of the system. I was certainly not aware of the system. I suspected something was different. I suspected maybe there was more than I understood. That's the whole idea of looking through faded glass at a clear forest. You know there's a forest, but you don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. And you don't know why everybody else is standing in the shed if there's a forest right out there. There's just this discomfort because you're like, there should be something more. I feel like there's something more, but everybody seems so happy right here, except me. I'm looking out this window feeling like there's something more. The reality is most people don't look out the window.
What is it that everybody in the shed believes?
That's what's so interesting. I think most people in the shed believe that the shed is a good thing. We need the shed. The shed keeps us warm when it's cold outside. It keeps us cool inside when it's hot outside. It protects us from the rain. It keeps the wind away. We need the shed. That's what most people, I think, start to believe about whatever shed they're born into. I need this church. I need this neighborhood. I need these friends. I need to be popular in school, because everybody else is after the same thing. I need good grades. Why do you think you need good grades? Because my mom said I needed good grades. Well, we don't question it any further than that. We don't question, why do you think your mom thinks you need good grades, right? And then when you look at the hierarchy of society, there's an actual anthropological pyramid that defines society, right? And it breaks into 3 levels. Individualism at the bottom level, tribalism in the center level, and then the state at the top level. Because the most advanced version of society is the state. It maximizes the contribution of each individual by forcing shared policy down all the way from top to bottom. So all people have to obey the state, but in exchange for their obedience, the state provides resources to all people, like clean water and loans and car loans and business loans and police forces and public schools. So we believe that this cabin is needed. It's the best cabin. It's the only cabin.
Is that wrong?
I think if you look at the world as it is, there's a lot of different cabins out there. Our cabin is quite different than the China cabin. The China cabin is quite different than the Russia cabin, right? The UK cabin is very different than the American cabin. So if you follow logic, the fact that different cabins exist at all would suggest that there is no best cabin. And then if there is no best cabin, then do we even need a cabin? Or perhaps there's a different option that's better.
Is there a different option that's better in your opinion?
I haven't found one yet, outside of living in a cabin and being the one that understands there's more. Because then you get all the benefits of the cabin, but you're also the one that knows that sometimes it's worth it to step outside.
Yeah, in your analogy, I was thinking, in fact, it's okay for there to be a cabin because I kind of need there to be a cabin because do you know what I like? Roads and healthcare and police. but if you can be one of the people that realizes you are in a cabin and that the rules of the cabin aren't actually
your rules.
Law, they're just made up rules, then you can bend them in certain ways to live the life that you want to live. And I think in many respects, entrepreneurship is kind of one of those things, because some of the narratives that you described there of thinking grades mattered were the narratives that nearly held me back in my life, because I was not doing well in school. My brothers were, everyone else was, and I nearly fell into the trap, which you learn in the shed, which is the people that get A's are going to be rich and happy. This is the like unspoken word. And then if you get like an E and a D, you're going to be poor and probably not that happy and probably going to live in a small house and you're probably going to struggle. And that's like a narrative. And through labeling theory, you can come to believe that as the truth and then play that out in your life. But I always think the biggest harm of, and I had a suspicion back then that the biggest harm of getting like an E in my exam was believing that I was an E. And they're two very different things. Like I can get an E, but it doesn't make me an E. But in the shed, it does make you an E. It's hard to...
Because everybody else labels you by what you perform inside the shed that defines them.
And then I self-label. I then start to tell myself in my self-esteem that I am an E grade. And then I show up like an E grade, which they've proven through labeling theory. You can tell someone they're something, or you can remind them of a stereotype that applies to them, and they'll immediately perform worse on a test, whatever that stereotype relates to. So, but entrepreneurship for me was saying, do you know what? I'm going to leave school, I'm going to drop out of university, and I'm going to try and like send a bunch of emails and figure out life myself outside of the system, because the system was never going to get me where I needed to go. If I had followed the system, I would still be working in the call center that I was when I was 19, you know, and basically have no free time, working till midnight at night and just getting shit from a boss that was an asshole to me.